You're listening to Nonpartisan Hacks, the politics and policy podcast where we talk about good government from the local level on up. I'm Joel Grenz, a City of Parksville councillor.
And I'm Sean Wood, a Parksville councillor and 2026 mayoral candidate. Today we're talking with Mayor Nicole Minions, just up the road in Comox. Nicole was elected as a councillor in 2018 and then ran unopposed for mayor in 2022, Joel.
So she went from being one voice around the table to facilitating the elected leaders without having to campaign for the job. And that's just one of the things we'll want to dig into today.
We're also going to talk about what it's like being a mayor in a town that's part of a trio. Comox, Courtenay, and Cumberland, all working together in the Comox Valley. There's a military base right in town. There's a historic treaty with Comox First Nation. And like a lot of desirable places on Vancouver Island, there's real tension between being a great place to live and a place that people can actually afford to live.
Plus, Nicole has an interesting background in banking, nonprofit work with foster kids and women's transition housing, real estate, and environmental protection. So she's seen a lot of sides of community life before getting into the mayor's chair.
Quick disclaimer, the views expressed here are our own and don't represent the official positions of the City of Parksville or any other body.
And we are recording today in Sean's kitchen, and there's a smell of fresh bread because Sean has just taken 4 loaves out of the oven. And people who listen to this podcast may know that we give guests who come in person a loaf or 2 of bread. How many loaves does our guest get today, Sean?
Today, our in-person guest, Nicole Minions, will be receiving 2 loaves of salt-flaked bread with organic flour from One Organic Farms in Saskatchewan.
So,
Nicole, welcome to Nonpartisan Hacks.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here today. Thanks for the invitation.
Hopefully you are not gluten-free.
I was going to make a joke that I'm gluten-free, but I am not gluten-free. No, I will enjoy that bread.
We only have non-gluten-free guests on the show.
The people who are gluten-free, they're not gluten-free after eating some of this bread.
That's true. There's gluten in it.
Yeah, that's true.
Nicole, thanks so much for coming on today. Maybe to start things off, we're going to want to dig into what it's like to mayor because you have now been a mayor for almost a full term. And you started off as a councillor in the town of Comox, and then you were acclaimed as mayor. Maybe you want to get into a little bit how you became mayor and how you decided to make the transition from council to being a mayor.
Sure. Yeah. Go back a couple of years now. I'd love to dig back into that. So it was definitely a challenging time in Comox back in 2022. It was just a couple months before the election, and people were starting to consider whether they were going to run again for council, for mayor. And unfortunately, our mayor at the time came out that he was terminally ill just in the last month or 2 right before elections. So it was quite sudden and I would say unplanned. And we also were in a time of losing our leader and colleague that many of us had worked with for between 1 term, and some people had worked with our former mayor, Russ Arnott, for 3 or 4 terms. So it had that personal aspect of watching a colleague be sick and deteriorate quite quickly while needing to keep kind of business moving. So I kind of made the decision that I would take a run for mayor. In the last 3 or 4 days, actually, during the campaign time, it was very, very sudden. And there were some other considerations of people that were considering running also. But I would say it looked quite different than other municipalities. There wasn't quite the same amount of planning and intent is the wrong word, but it was just a different scenario there. So I decided to run. I definitely expected there were a couple other individuals that were also going to be running or considering running. And it was kind of an interesting last 24, 48 hours, all those, conversations that happen in our circles. And I had put my papers in, and it just turned out that no one else did put their papers in. So I like to think it was because, I knew ahead that it really does suit my skill set, and I love the work that we get to do as the chair, but it all just kind of was a whirlwind and happened quite quickly. So it was kind of it was a lot of others that pushed me into that decision, a lot of phone calls and people encouraging that, and the decision, I'll just, go for that. I love the work anyway, and I wanted the challenge of being chair. So the way it came about was a little bit unique and different, but that's how it went out. And then I really was expecting, I had plans for a 6 or 7 week campaign like everybody else did. I had it relatively all laid out in a 3 or 4 day period. And then I just ended up not having to do that. So a little bit of an interesting path.
Yeah, acclaimed mayor, so ran up unopposed. So when you're deciding to transition into mayor, what is a skill set that you felt you had developed or had or background that prepared you for the role?
I think in general, just being a consensus builder and being really open to understanding where people's viewpoints are coming from. So I definitely have always really loved dialogue with people that I don't necessarily agree with, and just understanding, all the inputs that go into someone that has a different opinion than you. I've really always enjoyed those conversations. Any of the federal or provincial work we do, I really enjoy hearing kind of from, I don't want to say the other side of things, but really the other side of things and how things are impacting people in a way that doesn't come naturally to me. In Comox, the last 7 years, we've had really balanced council as far as different viewpoints. And so I knew that going in and knew that that was a skill set of mine, is just really wanting to somewhat listen to understand and try to figure out if there's some kind of solution that really does meet as much of the broad community that we represent. It's not just business, it's not just seniors, it's not just one angle. It's really trying to understand versus have a really black and white viewpoint on things. So I knew that that was something around other boards and other organizations that I worked with that I was very open to. And I think that's served our community well so far. But now looking back, it's been 3 years and I've had to run some bigger public hearings lately. And I think if those had come up in the first month or 3 months of the job, I might not have been prepared to chair meetings with 300 or 400 people that were, wanting to voice strong opinions. I think that's luckily something I've realized by chairing weekly meetings and doing smaller public hearings. It becomes something that you do become just better at observing how people might show up and how to really set the tone for meetings. So it's a skill set for sure.
Everybody's got to be respectful in those public hearings. If you have people on two different sides, the one side has to be respectful of the other side. You can't be cheering or clapping. That might stop other people from speaking up. And so you really have to run a tight one. I haven't had to run a public hearing yet, but the ones that I've seen that are run really well, it's very strict. And if we'll just clear it, we'll just have a recess and we'll clear the gallery. When it starts to go sideways and you just let people spend time on the microphone or clapping or cheering, it just can be really not a great respectful place to hear all of the opinions. And I love that you spoke to, you feel being a mayor is more of a facilitator and let's try to get consensus. Everyone has different lenses that they look at. You'll get to a better decision if you have all of those voices at the table. And it's less about, what a mayor might think is the right way and more of like, hey, you were all elected, so let's have that conversation and then we'll go from there. Love that viewpoint of yours.
Yeah, I like I really respect democracy. So, people got elected to the table for a reason. And
absolutely.
It's the same when working with our MLAs or MPs. It's those those viewpoints are very, very important to be heard. But I have a very big love of decorum. So public hearings have become something I really enjoyed. And I have sat in some other I like going to public hearings for some reason, but I've seen some really challenging public hearings. And it's like, that's what I really love, is a good decorum and then, yeah.
The skill set, though, that people expect the mayor to have, or what is involved in being mayor for the average person on the street, is, I think, so far away from what the actual skill set is. You see people going into being mayor thinking that it's, being like the prime minister or something, where you're doing press conferences and having these big ideas that you're putting forward and that you're yourself doing. But that's not how it works, really, at the table. And much of the day-to-day work as a mayor, especially in our sort of weak mayor system, is not that powerful, really, and that's not that big of a role. Were you surprised by any of that, or what does the average person think versus what you actually use in your day-to-day mayoral role?
Yeah, I think from like a average person perspective that may or may not attend council meetings or watch some of our live tapings of any of our communities, people see you at ribbon cuttings or parades. They do see you doing kind of these short little welcomes, and they really don't realize that it's much, much more about the, the actual meetings, the packages, the understanding of what's happening in the community. And we might get into it later, but, like planning of the infrastructure, the biggest things that we talk about, that's really not where people are seeing you. They're seeing you kind of do these really quick PR, public community things. And that's definitely maybe 20% of the job, but they're not seeing, the public hearings, the working with each individual counselor and the staff at town, and really setting the tone for how the community operates. It's not what public sees, which is when I've heard people say, I'm just going to, consider running for mayor and never being on council. And I think I think I had an idea of what being mayor would be like just from, you watch someone for 4 years, or you have other colleagues that have done it before, and really asking them, what does this actually look like? It's a huge benefit for people to at least have been able to watch someone else do the job and decide what to take and what not to take.
Yeah. The classic thing is like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, I know how to run stuff. But being a mayor and running a town in that sense is very different than running your own company. You've got staff, you've got various opinions, you've got to consider, not just at the council table, but in the community and various community groups that have a role in the community and have a say in what should be happening. So it's really, you speak to the kind of brokering or bringing those ideas together is something that people don't really see, but that is actually what the successful mayor does. The previous mayor, so your predecessor, sounds like was in that chair for quite a long time. Was that, did you learn from that, or what did you pick up from having such an experienced mayor when you first came into council? And what lessons have you carried forward?
Our previous mayor actually was there one term and was a counselor before that.
Oh, was a counselor before that. Okay.
Yeah, but I will say in a similar way, definitely had a really good one-on-one kind of personal connection with each counselor, and I think did a really great job of being as nonpartisan as we can be. So he really led with that, and was something I watched. But even just the opportunity across Vancouver Island, having some other mayor connections. And I was kind of led into a group early on about mentorship and what are the best ways to do this. There was some young leaders of municipal politics. There was young leaders of Vancouver Island, and just being able to ask any possible question that came up early on was really, really helpful. And I probably wouldn't have done it without some of those kind of resource groups out there. But it was a bit of a wing it. It was a bit of a, it was kind of thrown into the job at the time, and definitely a learn as you go. But I've really just noticed coming, unfortunately, closer to the end of this term, that after a couple of years at it, you really do figure out what your skill sets are, and then also what some of the things you could work on. Should the journey continue, there's always areas for improvement.
And often a thankless job, and you're kind of the lightning rod for problems. I don't know if you've noticed that in your last 3 years.
Yeah, I would say it's, I was talking to my kids about it one day because they were asking about why I enjoy it so much. I go out to some of the schools and talk to kids about, municipal work and the options of council and different, basically job opportunities in municipal government. And I think it's you get a lot of the negative, and then you also get a lot of the positive. So when something goes really well with, something your parks department did or your engineering department did, it's really those two extremes. You're either getting a lot of people coming up and saying thank you, and they're really, we have a great community, so people are very, very gracious and thankful. And then when something negative happens, it's the same. So you have to be really comfortable with that really big pendulum of gratitude and
don't get too high, don't get too low.
Yeah. And at the grocery store, you go out, you're going to get people that are saying thank you for something, and you're going to get someone who very much could be upset about something that may or may not have been in council's control, but you're someone that is able to stop and listen, and generally people are grateful that you've listened to whatever it is, positive or negative.
People just love being heard. For the most part, you might not be able to solve their problem today, and you might not have been the one that did the park work or whatever the other person's excited about, but that you spend a couple of minutes and listen to them, and they love being listened to, and that helps them a lot. Yeah,
and it informs also your role, hearing from those folks, positive, negative, in your jurisdiction or not. It is helpful to hear from people in the community, and and take that background to the council table. And speaking of sort of the maybe not jurisdiction, there's some interesting dynamics, I think, in your community around overlap between, I guess, jurisdiction is maybe the way to put it. There's a military base in Comox, so that's kind of a federal entity. That's maybe an interesting dynamic. And also Comox First Nation, with recently having ratified a treaty, if that's the right way to put it. How does the town of Comox kind of interface with these other government entities, for example, the base and the First Nation, who aren't funded by taxpayers in the town of Comox's property taxes, but do have services and need for services, and also need to feel a sense of being part of the Comox town community as well as being part of, say, the base? How does that dynamic work? It's something that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I think there's, I think the two you mentioned, CFB, Comox, the Air Force Base, and Comox First Nation, are basically groups that we're working with, I would say on a regular basis. There's not really a week that doesn't go by that we're not working with either of those two.
3 Comoxes.
3 Comoxes, that's right. And Comox Valley.
Yeah, the regional district.
Yeah. So we definitely are consistently overlapping as far as different planning, different processes. There's not one decision that doesn't affect the other generally. So we call them kind of referral outs, and we have a list of people that we're checking with on decision making. I think that's something that's really improved in the last 6 or 7 years since I've sat on council. Everyone used to work, from what I saw, in a little more of silos and didn't necessarily know what the other community partners or Comox First Nations were doing. And we soon realized that the more communication that was happening, the better, because if you go out into the community, there are Comox First Nations people living in Comox and on their unceded traditional territory. There's many, many military members living in Comox. So everything is very, very intertwined. Our current kind of leadership group meets every month. So it's someone from the base and someone from Comox First Nation, someone from Comox. We've got this really good informal kind of, I don't want to call it pipeline, but kind of communication that happens. And we've had quite a few of the same people at that table for going on 6 or 7 years, or at least the last 5 years through COVID. And that's really, really helped. So at any given time, we pretty much know these are your big things that you're working on. And often we can kind of, share a resource or chip in. So that leadership level, informal relationship has been really, really a good thing, I think, moving forward.
I can see it happening where, because, say, the town of Comox, the voter base is the voter base. They're not, they're the ones that actually live in the town of Comox and pay property taxes and all that sort of thing. So it can be easy for politicians to be like, I'm going to focus on their needs and I'm going to be in my own little world here in the town of Comox. But that's not the dynamic I'm seeing as much lately. You mentioned the last 6-7 years or whatever. I've observed that as well in other communities where there seems to be a lot more interest in collaborating across those jurisdictional lines, which is, in my opinion, very important to do. But maybe, especially when election time comes up, you want to give the impression that you're fighting for the town of Comox, as opposed to seeing a more regional or wider view than just that sort of myopic, like our own taxes go to our own stuff. But it's a real challenge, and the same in the city of Parksville as well, with city of Parksville being the biggest incorporated area in the community, and a lot of people look to Parksville to deliver services, but Parksville only has that small tax base to do that from, even though maybe the wider community that don't live in the city of Parksville proper would still benefit from that. In Comox, maybe there's a bit of a reverse dynamic in that the military base is federally funded and has some services and facilities that are available to people who live in the town of Comox but don't pay directly into those services, and so maybe don't have the same say that, I guess, the Minister of Defense would. How does that work?
I mean, it definitely gets complicated, because obviously our residents have that pride in our community and what our heritage has been, and the military base has been there longer than we were incorporated. So they opened back in 1942, and we incorporated in 1946. So Comox has that pride for being an Air Force base and pride for the community that they are. But at our regional office, there's about 90 shared services from all the, Courtenay, Comox, Cumberland, and the regional district. And so we are sharing so many of those services. I think in the last couple of years, what we have seen better action on is things like most of our services for the vulnerable population has been in Courtenay, and Cumberland and Comox has kind of said, well, that's where the need is. So like, we don't need to do anything on those things. And that's, again, more of a historical kind of take. And I don't think that's what most of our residents would necessarily agree with either. So when we started looking at how do we open warming centers during the winter time, Cumberland and Comox have both gotten on board on that in the last 2 or 3 years. How do we help fund some of the winter shelters that are open, not just when the threshold hits the lower amount, but we've really taken a regional approach to that. And I know that there's some, I don't want to say controversy around that, but there's a lot of debate around that is, which municipality should take care of that. But there's been some really good, I want to say like education and speaking with the community about this is why this is needed. And, this is some of the stigma that might come along with it that's not really true or accurate. But it's very important for our communities to come together on things like that, where it's a little bit too easy to try to put it all on one community and say, this is where it's located. You're 10 minutes away. It's not our challenge. So, there's regional services, I would say, that are continually evolving and coming out as future focused things. Comox they had a treaty vote for ratification. So provincial and federal ratification are kind of the next steps, from my understanding of a very complex, very complex topic. And I've tried to follow it and been involved with participating as a, observer of it. But just even the lands that they'll be getting are distributed throughout the Comox Valley through treaty. So there's just so many things that impact all of our groups. And I'm sure that other communities are doing this kind of leadership approach at a table where you're just trying to say, hey, these are all of the things that are happening right now to our community. They do really affect everybody else, maybe not to the same extent, has been just a really great way of operating our community as a region and trying to share in some of the challenges and opportunities. But we'll always go back. Comox is celebrating our 80th incorporation anniversary or birthday in January, and we're going to take events
Happy
like
birthday,
that.
by the way.
Thank you. 2 weeks. We're having a party with all of those groups coming. It's actually going to be quite fun.
Comox looks great for 80.
It does. It's a beautiful 80. When we have the opportunity to celebrate, that we are an Air Force base or we're Comox First Nation or any of those things, we also want to take the time to, be traditional and show some of the pictures of what things look like over those decades. So it's a bit of a approach. We're the Comox Valley, and we're also very much town of Comox and proud of that also.
Sounds like a balance is being struck there. Hopefully this internet research is correct that you said that 90% of a counselor's job is ensuring excellent core services. Was that you?
I might have said that.
Okay.
I've heard many people say that.
Okay. Well, in this case,
I might change it to 80 at this
partially
point in my life.
Okay. And then the other 10 or 20%, what's the other stuff? And how do you see that as mayor now, this idea of core services being the core of the job? And then there are some other things that are really much smaller part of the job, but it's actually the stuff that people are most concerned about, especially around elections. Very few people are voting based on who's making promises around potholes or infrastructure renewal.
Yeah. Again, maybe I said that a couple of years ago. I think I've now, I will talk to our leadership staff team and say, there's all of these opportunities that are out there on top of the core services. So the core services are already happening. We've got our fire department and that they're, doing amazing work with our volunteer fire department. The parks department is doing these amazing things, but there's all these opportunities to kind of add kind of the extra things. So talking about like natural asset management and what is our parks department able to do in part of what they're already doing. And that's where some of our becoming a bee-friendly city about 2 years ago came out, and the first...
As in the insect, not the letter.
As in the insect,
just to
sorry,
clarify.
not the letter.
Yeah.
But kind of I don't want to say value adds, but there's all this opportunity to try to do things a new way or a better way and really pay attention to the actual land that's within the municipality or town that you're working in. So that's where I kind of say, maybe I said 90% before, and I think there's a little bit more of a broader ability that we actually have as councillors and mayors to be able to get things done. All the things I kind of aspired or ran on 7 or 8 years ago are still very much opportunities now. So our council is really focused on youth recreation opportunities as we look at all the families that are moving into our community. And there's so much work that can be done there. And I would say that's part of the 10 to 20% of extra that can be done. It's not just the core service of your road, sewer, water. It's like, what are we doing for families that actually impact their health and wellness? What are we doing for the parks that are getting beautified already? It's like, what could we do that's kind of that next level? And I think there's more room on councils than I first maybe believed when I made that statement. Sure. I think there's a little more, I don't want to say magic, but there's more opportunities because of the great, we have property taxes, we have staff that are qualified and educated and want to do that more. So, and
an understanding of what the community's needs are, maybe better than other levels of government do at the kind of hyper-local level, at least.
Definitely. And these, I don't want to call them wicked problems, but some of these problems are not going away. The challenge of climate change and adaptation is not going away. Housing is not going away, but it's this idea that we can also kind of get some fun and aspiring or things done at the same time. So those things aren't going away, but there's time to maybe be able to do both.
Tell us a bit more about your bee-friendly city. What does that mean? Obviously, we don't want the bee population to keep declining, and so the certification must mean that whatever we're putting into the parks is kind of bee-friendly and will help the population. Tell us a bit more. Yeah,
so bee-friendly bee populations in North America have been on the decline. I believe it's something like 50%. And just as far as food growth on some of our ALR farmlands and food growth is obviously something really, really important on Vancouver Island. It's very, very desired to get
food
those
multiple times a day.
We do also, but so bee-friendly community basically just means that you're planting pollinator-friendly gardens throughout the year. You're encouraging people, for example, like no mow May is a big thing where people don't keep their yards perfectly manicured and landscaped during some of the springtime when there's a lot of bees and butterflies and things like that in the gardens. So basically to get the designation, we just had to commit to doing some public education, public awareness, but also we did change a lot of our gardens as they were coming up for renewal into things that were more pollinator friendly. So I think it was like a $3,000 annual commitment. It was not a monetary thing. It was basically just saying that this is the practices that will change. So I know in BC there's quite a few communities that are doing that, and just educating individual homeowners that it's an option. There's no mandatory, but it's kind of leading by example of this is how we're going to do our parks. This is what you could do at your own house if you choose.
No penalties for people who are cutting their grass.
No penalties. Okay, but people used to think that certain lawns were not as desirable to look at. And I think that idea, if a municipality gets behind it and there's rationale for it, that it's not always about having the greenest lawn.
It has to be puttable. Puttable lawn. No, we actually...
I get
you can putt on it?
Yes.
Getting par.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No?
Golfable, yeah.
Golfable? Yeah. Our we do a bit of that in Parksville as well. In trying to allow for pollinators, and the no mow May thing, I think, is a thing as well here. So it's great. But would you consider that to be part of the 10-20% outside of the normal stuff, or is that kind of in the...
I think so. I think that's kind of I don't want to say above and beyond, but it's the extra. It's the things that people might not have elected you to do or be front of top of mind. But once you're actually getting into it, it's some of the extras that can happen. I think there's a lot more room there than that 90% said. But our budget, if you look at the budget, it's 90 or 95% road, sewer, water, fire. That is what we're here for at municipal government. But what can we do? Kind of how can we play around creatively in those areas, I think is the most important thing.
And policing is going to go up too when you guys are kind of hit that 15,000 instead of only paying 70% of your RCMP, you're going to be paying 90%. You guys probably prepared for that and put a little bit of money away, have you?
Yeah, we've had a reserve fund going for over 10 to 15 years, kind of as soon as we knew that was likely going to happen. We're semi-prepared for that, but it's definitely changing, how our taxes look and how we, managing 90% is definitely going to be a change that's, once it's there, it's there. So I know that's something many communities are facing.
Yeah, we're the same in Parksville. I think the math works out to about a 5% property tax increase for that first year whenever we get the letter from the feds or the RCMP. And so anything that you can do to put money away ahead of time will smooth out that first year anyways, which is a big jump, that 5%.
Yeah, ours was in that same 5%, if not slightly higher. So it's definitely a large hit. But we had enough reserve funds for the first couple of years, and we're just kind of rolling with it as it comes because other things have come up that we weren't expecting either. So the funding side of things is the hardest, I would say, thing to
and it's not
manage.
Glamorous. It's Joel and I and yourself, we know about the kind of the 90% funding that we're going to have to do when we hit 15,000, but it's not really a campaign talking point. People don't really care about that. And it's almost like an asset management thing as well, to put money away ahead of time in case that water main breaks or in case a sewer line breaks. And it's not glamorous to talk about, but it's in that 80 or 90% of, hey, this is the job. And we're doing the smart thing to put money away, asset management. I think you said earlier when we were chatting before the show that Comox is doing quite a good job at putting money away for other assets management as well, trying to be a leader in that. Yeah,
we started back in 2023 an infrastructure renewal fund. So we kind of had staff go and report, what are our assets worth? Where are they at in their basically lifespan? And it came back that we had a pretty critical deficit that within about 15 years, we could basically have all our reserves gone and we would be going into the negative. So we debated some different scenarios as far as closing the gap, as we would say, and came up with basically it was a $51 per household, or about a 0.5% increase that would happen every single year cumulatively. So this year it's got to be up to about $153 per household, which is now over a percent addition. But it's a separate line item. And again, like the policing, it's just trying to keep some transparency on why we're doing the numbers that we're doing and try to keep everything really separated so people can see we really are trying to be as fiscally responsible with their tax dollars as we can. So we decided whether we wanted to kind of break it out and be really open and explain exactly where things were going. And that's the way we decided to do it, was a line item with the renewal fund. And I'm not sure how common that is through the province, but it's worked well for us so far. And we knew we could go back if all of a sudden the provincial government came and said, we're going to start bailing out communities or giving funds. We have the ability to show how much money we've put away ourselves.
I think we're doing 0.5% as well on our asset management. And there's kind of two theories here. One is, do we get the current property tax owners to put money away for future stuff, or do we just wait until, the Calgary water line breaks and then you have a huge kind of, in a strata, it's a special assessment that you have to pay right away. And having been part of a strata, when that bill comes suddenly and there's not enough money in the contingency fund, well, that's a huge bill to pay for a new roof on a strata, for instance, or Calgary putting a new water line in. But I think Joel and I and most of our council and mayor are also on the same page. Hey, it's smarter to put some money away for that rainy day. And although the taxes are going into the budget right now, and it seems like a pain in the butt, and it's going in earning interest for what? Why are we doing that? Let's just wait until something breaks. But when something breaks and that mayor and council have kicked the can down the road, I don't think it's a great look. And I think that Comox has chosen to be on the right side of that theory.
Yeah, definitely. I think, when you see kind of the worst case scenarios, they're not good. And the chances, of something not costing significantly more money in the future, like we're trying to save so that if things go up as they have been going up, we have some preparation for that. So it's trying to take away some of the future pain and kind of, smooth out those curves is what we were hoping to do, but not easy decisions because we get more people expressing how concerned they are with affordability. And it's hard to be making those decisions, but it really is in the name of trying to save future dollars.
And I love how you spoke to education, especially the bee-friendly city and your asset management. If you're out there with your communication and getting people educated on, hey, why are you making these decisions? Then that really helps maybe kind of swallow that pill of the taxes going up. Then people have a better understanding of why you're doing it a certain way. I love that.
Well, it's tricky too, though, because in local government, most people don't pay attention that much to what's going on. And unless they open up their tax bill and they're like, whoa, what's going on with this? Why is it so big all of a sudden? And we can talk about it in council meetings till we're blue in the face, but people aren't necessarily paying attention to that. As exciting as our council meetings are, they're not watching them all. And so they don't really think about it until that bill comes and they're like, why is this so expensive? So it's a real tricky one. I don't know if you've solved that one, but...
I haven't. Yeah, I do find public engagement and community education and all of those things is like so important, and I think we do it no matter what. But when you actually kind of look at what is the number of people watching, let's say a highly kind of critical council meeting, you're only going to get a percentage of the population watching. So it's the most important thing is to have it out there, have it findable, and it's an option from then on out. But as we come into next year, election year, we do have a relatively engaged community at that time. So it's kind of, I find the ability to summarize why things are the way they are and make them digestible for people, the average person who might not have hours to learn about what we're doing. But getting those summary points when people are paying attention are really important.
So you're starting to put your mind to how to do those summaries then for the next election?
She's the mayor. She always has her mind on that.
I just going into the next year, it's obviously on my mind. And I think even more so is, the why. So, if it's not about what did you get done, but why would you entertain kind of going through that process because of the things you might be able to bring to the community. So I think we all look at, what have we done, but it's also like, I like to think of what's actually the next exciting thing that's coming. And those are the important things I think we want to share with the community. So they have an idea of, what their choices are.
Yeah, and it's hard to maybe speak about tangibly, but there is also an important role, probably I assume even more so for mayor, working with counterparts in provincial and federal government, both on the elected side, but maybe a little on the sort of staff side of those bodies. Maybe can you speak a little bit to your approach there, or whether you've been able to move the needle by working with your staff and federal and provincial counterparts? I
would say, much more in the mayor role. There's a little bit more speaking with the MLA and MP in our area and getting those conversations going. Our current MLA and MP are on the opposition for both federal and provincial. And so that's been also like a learning curve as far as when we're going to different advocacy conferences or meetings. It's kind of a different approach now, is because we're sitting in opposition. And so that's been a bit of a learning curve, is how do we work with the opposition now and in kind of looking at what's happening in, Minister of Health or Minister of Housing or Bill 44. And it's kind of it's an interesting difference, because I hear more of the opposition opinions, whereas before when we had NDP, MLA and MPs, it was a little bit different. So I'm still learning how we're best suited in our communications with our MLAs and MPs, because there's been a couple different experiences over the last couple of years. Things have been changing. I don't want to say quickly, but changing.
Yeah, we can have a federal provincial election at any time too. Yeah. So you kind of have to stay pretty flexible on that side of things too. Nonpartisan Hacks, of course, is
Nonpartisan
Hacks.
Nonpartisan
is our name of our podcast.
Well, I can see that's an interesting one right there, is when you maybe had a government member, and so you don't need to maybe be as, I guess, careful. Like, you'd have to be a little more careful when you have an opposition member. You want to work with them, but you also don't want to come across as being partisan with any of them. So,
or more just from their education perspective, it's just a different perspective that you're learning of. So I got a tour of the opposition chambers recently, which was really interesting because I've been down I love going down to Victoria and getting tours of the building and watching some of their sittings. That's been something I've enjoyed doing for many, many years.
Yeah.
And it's just a different perspective. It's a different, I got to meet.
Not as nice, right? It's like,
Now, Joel, you be nice for Nonpartisan Hacks.
the furniture's not as nice.
It's actually quite beautiful, but it's been an interesting perspective, and just again that reality of if we're talking about nonpartisan, I mean there's all sorts of foundation work that you can make with others that are nonpartisan. You'll see a lot of shared vision or shared ideas and concepts with opposition, where when we have this, I don't want to say it is an opportunity to speak with people in opposition. I learn more sometimes there because there's you're learning from a perspective that maybe you're not considering. So I really, really enjoy working with MLAs or MPs, regardless of whether they're currently parties in power or they're in the opposition. It's just an opportunity to learn where many of the people in your community, since they got voted,
they voted for them. Yeah, for sure.
So it's just all about learning kind of where they're coming from.
Well, and you mentioned that you enjoy speaking to all sides of an issue, and I think that is an important local government job. And when you get to Ottawa or Victoria, often the perspective there is far more partisan, and it's nice to not have to be that partisan when you're local government, because you're working together as a council, as opposed to having kind of an oppositional approach at the council table, which is more what we see with like question period and all the arguing and framing and all that happens federally and provincially.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I was asking some questions to our MP and MLA, and I definitely, as you get up higher at the federal level, there's basically no cross communication across parties happening. It sounds like at the provincial level, it's there somewhat, and there's some conversation, and municipally, it's almost non-existent as far as those partisan lines. So it's one of the reasons I love municipal government, is we really don't form those lines where you can't speak to another person because of a party affiliation. That's a completely different world as you go up into federal.
And the MLAs and MPs, they're just people too who live in our communities, but they chose to, run for a party, and then they have to kind of toe the party line, and that's the job at the province and the federal levels. Whereas, we can be very thankful. I'm very thankful at the local government level that we don't have to do that. Some of the bigger cities, Vancouver, they do have that party divide, but it really makes it great at the local government level that we can listen to all of the perspectives, and there's not really parties kind of calling the shots, and you just get to be an advocate on the issue itself.
So looking now ahead, as Sean mentioned in the opening, he's put his name forward as mayor.
Yeah,
you've been a mayor now for a while. How about you give some advice to Sean here?
Please go ahead. Please.
Okay. Well, I think Sean's had some experience here, but I would say one of the biggest things is if you're going to be that facilitator, mediator role, it's really being able to not take things personally, which I think you probably have learned in your time in local government. But
can't believe you said that. I'm just kidding.
I would say specifically in the mayor role, it's something that you're continuously in a position where you may hear something is said to you that is personal or is, as natural human beings, we're going to take personally. But if the job is to keep council functional and debating and fair, it doesn't matter what my individual thoughts or feelings are sometimes, and that's something I've had to learn how to set aside. It's not my job to let someone that I agree with speak more. It's really about fairness. So I definitely have had to take away that sensitive feeling side of things sometimes that come up, and even, as councillors, the mayor will get, again, the blame and the glory for things. And I think that's something that once you just accept that's part of the job, is you're the spokesperson. And the taking, not taking things to heart, because so I let things roll off a lot easier than I would have maybe before.
Sure.
But
it's tricky for me probably, Nicole, because I am a pretty sensitive person, but I have learned as, when I ran federally, I really had to grind through a few parts of that election nomination contest, et cetera, where you just learn that, wow, I really got to separate, my heart from taking a lot of things personally, and it's just part of the game. And then council hasn't been too bad for us, I don't think. But really appreciate that, of course. And it kind of feels like a nonpartisan thing too, where you kind of have to just separate you as a person and then the role, giving everyone that fair voice, even if you agree with them or if you disagree with them, everybody gets to. It's like the public hearing sort of. Even if you don't really agree with the person who's at the microphone personally, that's fine. They get to have their 2 minutes or whatever, as we were talking about a public hearing.
I guess the maybe final thing I'd be curious about in the advice for Sean segment, is
I didn't know we were doing this segment.
It's not in the script, yeah. The role of the mayor with staff, I can see there being something where the mayor may have some big ideas, and that 10 to 20% you mentioned that are kind of maybe a little bit out of the lane of what staff would maybe want to do. You mentioned that staff can get excited about doing some of those things as well, but staff, I hear a lot at the different tables, the regional district and council, is that there is a capacity challenge always in having enough staff to do all the big ideas. How do you balance that? How do you keep sort of staff motivated with some maybe more fun projects that are outside of the normal asset maintenance type stuff without putting too much on their plate?
Yeah, I think that's something we've definitely heard is the resources are pretty taken up. So we look at it from our annual kind of strategic priority meetings as we involve all of our senior leadership team in that. So you're kind of working there for 4 to 6 hours, and they're watching the process. So the idea is we all sit down as council, we really deep dive into what new potential ideas or opportunities we have as a council. Senior leadership participates in that also. So if there's new ideas or things like that, they're there as part of that conversation. And then there's this idea of, throughout the year, we're not going to be throwing tons and tons of ideas at the wall. It's you've got these 2 or 3, for example, recreation, youth recreation, reconciliation, vibrant downtown. We kind of picked 2 or 3 things, and we said, all departments can affect these 2 or 3 things, and we're not going to change this for another year unless something drastic changes in the global or something changes. So I think having the initial buy-in is really important, and also just kind of listening. I felt earlier on in the term there was more opportunities for more ideas, and staff did really push back and say we're doing more than we've done in ever before. Like you feel like there's not enough happening. There's more happening and more kind of modernization and piloting of projects. And there's this our organization is a capacity for now. So there was really listening to the reality that for many, many years, things operated, in a box. And so it's great to try new things and to say that this is the 2 or 3 things we really want to see progress and really want to be at the forefront of. But when those things are already happening, you don't find more and pile it on and pile it on and pile it on. So including them in the process, and obviously the mayor, CAO, chief administration officer role is very unique and interesting. And I meet with our CAO weekly. So we have a very I would say open and honest business communication. And I represent what council's talking about. He represents what senior leadership is at. And it's just kind of respecting the boundaries of both staying in our lanes, but also challenging. I feel like we both challenge each other in our weekly meetings sometimes to really understand the perspective of the other group. Yeah, I call it our team, but we can't always be a team, but our team is strong in Comox. So yeah, keeping that honest communication going is very important.
Before we let you go, Mayor, I was wondering about tree bylaws or development permit areas. Do you guys do anything special kind of on the environmental bylaw side of things up in Comox? I didn't do any homework on this one, so.
We are just doing our tree bylaw right now. So we're doing an urban forest management plan. We hadn't done one for about 15 years. And so we're actually just working through it right now. So it'll kind of be a late addition to our OCP. But we do have DVP areas and tree bylaws coming in we've done some amendments over the last couple of years to try to strengthen, for example, a new development, we went from 25 to 30% tree retention, and now we're looking at on individual lots and on single family lots on how we look at it. But we were a little bit late to the game with all the bylaw and OCP updates that were required through the province.
Sure. We're just getting into our OCP here in Parksville. Any tips for Joel and I as we kind of crack it open going into 2026?
Okay, as you crack it open, I tried to follow what some of the other communities were doing, because in a formal way, we weren't communicating too much with Cumberland and Courtenay on what they were doing. So just as a good idea or good governance, just tried to track what was happening at their meetings and going to some of their meetings, finding out who they were, considering who their stakeholders were, but very different. I feel like just watching how ours went, how theirs went, completely a different experience and different public input, different process. But our last OCP was done before my first term. So I feel like it felt like a very new process, but I tried to monitor what other communities were doing. So the good thing about being 2026 is there's lots of communities that have done them over the last year or two. So it's just...
So you're just going to copy theirs?
It's not copying, it's just process, just the process and knowing the community didn't always focus on what I would expect there to be a focus on. We got, very commonly, it was very much story heights with ours. That was the big topic. But yeah, just watching what other communities did of similar size, right? There's lots of that. Yeah,
we're very similar size. Parksville and Comox, very similar size. We should definitely compare notes on those OCP changes.
We didn't even talk about housing affordability. We'll have to have the mayor back sometime probably, unless we wanted to.
Well, you can solve it in 5 seconds or less, I think, right?
We probably don't want to. It's a pretty big topic.
She didn't bite on that one.
No.
Housing is a topic on its own, but...
Yeah. Nicole, thanks so much for stopping into Parksville. Thanks for taking the time to join us. It's been a stellar conversation about what it takes to lead a growing community while keeping its character intact.
And for our listeners, you can learn more about the town of Comox at comox.ca. If you want to see what Mayor Minions and her councillor are working on, they've got all their meetings and agendas and updates on the website. You can even watch the meetings, which, as we mentioned, not enough people watch. So it's good to watch them. I recommend doing it. They can be very interesting.
That's a wrap on this episode of Nonpartisan Hacks. We'd love to hear what you think. If you have a guest suggestion, a good government story, or a topic idea, drop us a line at nonpartisanhacks.com.
Until next time, take care of yourself and your community.
Thanks so much, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me.